All right, so today we are going to be taking a deep dive into Dune Messiah,
Okay.
the sequel to Frank Herbert's masterpiece, Dune. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably just devoured Dune.
Mm-hmm.
All the political intrigue, the epic battles, the sandworms. You're probably like, what happens next? Right?
Well, get ready for Dune Messiah because it's a totally different kind of book.
Really?
Yeah, this one is way less about like conquering deserts, and
Yeah.
it's a lot more about what happens when you actually get that power, like the consequences of having all that power.
Okay. I am intrigued, but I'm also a little skeptical. I mean, Paul Atreides, he's the emperor now, right?
Right.
He's the ruler of like a known universe. So how bad can things really get?
Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but the Goodreads reviews,
Uh-huh.
they're calling this book a little bit of a letdown,
Really?
especially for people who are expecting like Dune Part 2.
Ouch, a letdown.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So what is it about Dune Messiah that's got people so, I don't know, down on it?
Well, for starters, it takes place 12 years after Dune.
Okay.
And Paul is on the throne, but things are not good.
Oh,
In fact, one of the most shocking things in this book is that we learn from Paul himself
oh, wow.
that there were all of these horrible things that were done in his name during the jihad.
Oh, really?
We're talking billions of people dead, planets like totally sterilized.
Whoa.
Not exactly the heroic Muad'Dib that we remember from the end of Dune.
Okay, hold on. Billions. Sterilized planets. That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
You're telling me that the sequel to Dune just like throws us right into this like moral like crisis of his reign?
Yeah, pretty much. And that's actually what makes Dune Messiah so different from Dune. It's really all about looking at what happened because of Paul's actions, what happened psychologically, what happened politically. And it kind of makes us ask ourselves, like, is this guy really a hero? Or is he a tyrant? Or is he something in between?
Okay, I gotta admit the dark turn has kind of piqued my interest.
Yeah.
But if we're talking letdown, is it just that? Or is the writing style also like really different?
Well, the action that you saw in Dune, all that big epic scale is definitely toned down in Dune Messiah. It's a way more introspective book. Like, it's a lot more about what's going on inside Paul's head and all the plots against him.
Conspiracies, huh? Now you've got to tell me more about that. Who's trying to take down the emperor?
Oh, and you know the usual suspects. You've got the Bene Gesserit. They're always lurking in the shadows.
Right.
You've got the Tlaigzu.
Oh, of course.
Doing all their crazy genetic stuff. And get this, even a rogue guild navigator gets involved.
What's the...
They're all trying to chip away at Paul's power. You know, he seems untouchable, but they're all trying to take him down.
So it's like a political thriller, but set in the Dune universe.
Exactly.
Sign me up. Although,
Yeah.
you know what? I read some Goodreads reviews, and some people were a little critical of how women are portrayed in the book.
Mm.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, Herbert's writing was really groundbreaking, especially for the time that it came out. But yeah, you can definitely tell that it reflects some of the biases of that era. And some of the women, especially Aaliyah and Shani, are written in a way that modern readers might find a little, I don't know, outdated.
Outdated.
Or maybe even a little offensive.
Okay, can you give me some specific examples?
Yeah, so let's take Aaliyah, for example. She's Paul's sister, and she's a powerful reverend mother, but she's also still a teenager in this book. And for some reason, Herbert really focuses on her sexuality. There's even a whole scene where she's practicing sword fighting naked.
Whoa, naked sword fighting. That seems a little unnecessary, even for the Dune universe.
Yeah, it's definitely jarring, especially because Aaliyah is such a complex character. She's got all this power, and she's dealing with a lot of issues from her past. But then you get this scene, and it feels like she's just being objectified, you know? It feels like a step backwards from the really strong female characters that we saw in Dune.
Yeah, that's a bummer. What about Chani? I mean,
Right.
she was like such a strong character in Dune.
Yeah, unfortunately, Chani doesn't really do much in Dune Messiah.
Well,
She's mostly concerned with, like, giving Paul an heir. She doesn't really have that same independent spirit that we saw in the first book.
oh man, that's a shame. It seems like Hubert really missed an opportunity to develop those characters even more.
Yeah, I think you're right. Dune Messiah definitely falls short when it comes to the female characters, and it's something to keep in mind if you're going to read it.
All right, so we've got a darker, more introspective story with political conspiracies and some issues with how the female characters are portrayed. That's a pretty big departure from the epic Dune that we all know and love. So the big question is, for someone who just devoured Dune, is Dune Messiah even worth reading?
Well, if you're hoping for Dune, but, part two
Yeah.
with big battles and sweeping desertscapes and all that, then yeah, you might be disappointed. But it's not just like a smaller version of Dune. One Goodreads reviewer said it was like a Shakespearean tragedy,
Oh,
full
whoa.
of political intrigue, moral dilemmas, and people wrestling with fate.
Shakespeare in space. I
Yeah.
kind of like that.
Yeah, it's got that kind of Hamlet or Macbeth vibe, like
Right.
ambitious characters driven by prophecies, making these choices that have terrible consequences. That's kind of the feeling you get with Dune Messiah.
Okay, so we're trading in sandworms for soliloquies.
Right.
I could dig it. But one thing I really loved about Dune was like the world building, like all the details about the Fremen culture and the ecology of Arrakis, even the spice trade. Does Dune Messiah go into any of that?
Well, it doesn't really expand on it in the same way,
Okay.
but it does give you a really interesting look at how things changed after Dune,
Hey.
because of what Paul did.
Okay.
We see how Paul being in power really changed the political landscape and how everybody's so obsessed with Muad'Dib now. And we see how the environment on Arrakis has changed too.
So it's more about exploring like the changes to society and culture after Paul became emperor.
Exactly. And you see it all through the eyes of characters who are like struggling with what they believe in and who they're loyal to.
Mm.
For example, we get to see more of what the Bene Gesserits are really up to, their long-term plans and stuff. It's pretty fascinating.
That does sound interesting. Earlier you mentioned the Tleilax who are up to their old tricks.
Yeah.
What are they doing this time around?
Oh, they're always playing the long game, those guys. This time they created a gula of Duncan Idaho. You remember him?
Wait, Duncan Idaho. He's back.
Yeah.
But how? He died in Dune.
Right, he did. But the Tleilaxu are really good at, genetic manipulation.
Of course.
So they basically brought him back as a clone, like with all his memories and everything.
Okay, that's super cool, but also super creepy.
Right.
So what's the deal with bringing Duncan back? What's their plan?
That's the big question. It kind of unfolds throughout the book, and it adds a lot of mystery to the plot. I mean, the Tleilaxu are always scheming, right?
Right.
So Duncan's a really important part of that.
You're really making me want to read this book, even with all the stuff about the female characters. But are there any other books you could compare it to, just to kind of, I don't know, give me an idea of what to expect?
Yeah. Some people on Goodreads compared it to Isaac Asimov's Foundation series.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, Dune Messiah is on a smaller scale, but they both deal with power and the problems with trying to predict the future and what happens when you have these big plans that don't really work out the way you wanted them to.
That's interesting. I haven't read Foundation, but I know it's a classic. Are there any other, I don't know, literary comparisons that might help?
Let me think. One reviewer mentioned The Lord of the Rings,
Right.
specifically Frodo's journey with the One Ring.
Okay.
They said it was like Paul's prescience was kind of like the ring. It was a burden. It made him lonely, and it led him down a dark path.
That makes sense. Paul's prescience was always kind of a double-edged sword. But it sounds like Dune Messiah really explores like the negative side of it, like how it affected him mentally.
Exactly. It really makes you think about the nature of power and how dangerous fanaticism can be, and how hard it is to escape your destiny.
So you're saying that this sequel basically takes all the action and epic stuff from Dune, throws it out the window, and gives us a psychological drama.
Yeah, pretty much. But here's the thing. It's still a really good book. I mean, it's a completely different experience, but it's just as rewarding. It's just in a different way.
Okay.
If you can kind of let go of what you're expecting and really focus on the deeper themes, I think you'll find it really captivating and thought-provoking.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm definitely curious about this new direction and all these heavier themes.
Yeah.
I just got to be prepared for something slower and more, introspective.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I have one more question. A lot of the reviews I read said Dune Messiah is really relevant to what's going on in the world today. What do you think they meant by that?
Yeah, that's interesting. One reviewer talked about how the book looks at religious fanaticism and how information can be manipulated and how some leaders use people's fear to gain power.
Okay.
They were saying that all of that is really similar to what's happening politically right now.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it feels like we're always getting bombarded with different stories, right? And it's hard to know what's true and what's not. It's easy to get caught up in something without really understanding what it's all about.
Exactly. And Dune Messiah kind of warns us about that. It's like, it's saying that blindly following any ideology or leader can lead to really bad things. It's saying we need to think critically and question the people in charge. And be careful of anyone who says they have all the answers.
That's a really powerful message.
Hmm.
And it makes Dune Messiah sound even more relevant now than when it was first published. So after all this discussion, after all the good and the bad, the big question is, for someone who loved Dune, is it really worth reading the sequel?
Okay, so here's the bottom line. Dune Messiah, it's a very different book than Dune. Like, if you want another epic space opera
Right.
with all the action and everything,
Yeah.
you might be a little bit disappointed.
So it's not really a direct sequel. It's more like its own thing.
Exactly. It's more like a deep dive into Paul Atreides, like what's going on in his head
Okay.
and all the consequences of his choices,
Yeah.
the philosophical stuff.
Okay, so it's more of a character study about power and destiny and, doing the right thing, but not always working out.
Yeah, exactly. And it really makes you think about what it means to be a hero and how easy it is to get caught up in fanaticism and how hard it can be to escape, what you're supposed to do.
It's interesting. You mentioned fanaticism.
Oh.
One Goodreads review said that the book is like a warning against blindly following leaders.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Herbert does a great job of showing how even people with good intentions can, manipulate others, even someone like Paul.
Right.
And his prescience, he wanted to use it to help people. But it ends up creating this cult of personality around him.
And that leads to all the terrible things he was trying to stop.
Exactly. Dune Messiah really shows us how dangerous it can be to just follow someone without thinking for yourself. To just get swept up in a movement without really understanding the consequences.
That's kind of scary when you think about it. It seems like Herbert is saying that even the best intentions can go wrong, especially when you have absolute power.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so interesting. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about heroism. And it forces you to face some uncomfortable truths about human nature. It's definitely a book that stays with you.
So if I want a book that's going to make me think, and that's going to be really intense, and that's going to explore the dark side of power, Dune Messiah is a good choice.
Totally. But just remember, it's not going to be all action and adventure.
Right.
It's more of a slow burn. It's about the dialogue, the internal struggles, not so much about the battles and stuff.
Okay. So I need to kind of adjust my expectations. Be ready for something different.
Yeah. Dune Messiah is a masterpiece, but it's a different kind of masterpiece than Dune.
Well, you give me a lot to think about. I'm definitely intrigued. I'm going to give Dune Messiah a shot with an open mind and see where this darker, more introspective journey takes me.
Awesome. I think you'll really enjoy it. Just remember, the best stories are the ones that challenge us, the ones that make us question everything,
Right.
and the ones that stick with us long after we're done reading.
That's a great point. And I'm sure we'll be talking about the Dune universe again in future deep dives,
Yeah.
As we explore the other books. Thanks for walking me through all this. It's been fascinating.
Of course, it was my pleasure. It's always fun to talk about these stories that make you think.
And to everyone listening, if you've read Dune Messiah, let us know what you think. What parts really stuck with you? What surprised you? Join the conversation. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.